Ferdinand Porsche was not born into a world of speed, but into a world where metal was shaped by hand, slowly and with effort. His father was a tinsmith, a man who repaired what others threw away, and that small workshop became Ferdinand's first classroom. There were no toys, no dreams of fame. There were tools, the smell of iron, and a silence in which observation mattered more than words. While other children ran through the streets, he took objects apart, trying to understand how something moves, why something lives, while something lives, while something else stays still. He was quiet, often misunderstood, a child who listened more than he spoke. In that modest, almost invisible environment, an idea began to form, that the world could be changed, not through force, but through understanding. Far from big cities and famous names, a journey began that no one took seriously, except him. Ferdinand's childhood was shaped not only by poverty, but by a body that often failed him. He was small, fragile, weaker than other children. He could not rely on strength, nor prove himself in the ways the world respected at the time. Illness slowed him down, and quiet mockery from others settled deep inside. But it was precisely in that sense of lack that his advantage was born. While others claimed space with their bodies, he claimed it with his mind. He learned to sit longer, to observe more carefully, to think further ahead. Every limitation turned into discipline, every weakness into a need for precision. He did not want to win through force, but to outthink mechanics, to find perfect balance where strength was not enough. That body which lagged behind his dreams taught him patience, and patience taught him control, a quality that would later become the core of everything he created. While others turned off the lights and went to bed, Ferdinand stayed awake, surrounded by silence and wires. Electricity fascinated him because it was invisible, yet powerful. In it, he saw what he had been seeking in himself, a force that did not need to shout. He conducted small experiments, often failing, sometimes dangerous, but always instructive. Engines were more than machines to him. They were living beings with their own rhythm, their own moods. He learned to listen, to detect a flaw before it became a breakdown. He did not chase speed, he chased perfection in silence. Mistakes piled up, but he never gave up. Every night spent in the workshop reinforced his obsession, a conviction that true power lies in details others fail to see. And there, in that quiet, a philosophy was born that would later define Porsche: precision over force, balance over chaos. Leaving home was not a bold gesture to be remembered, it was a quiet necessity. Ferdinand left the familiar without guarantees, without anyone waiting with open arms. He carried no plan, only the belief that knowledge could keep him moving. The cities he entered were not romantic, they were cold, full of people who already had their place. He had none. He slept little, worked a lot, sometimes for small money, sometimes just for the chance to be near the machines. Every day was a test of endurance, and every mistake could send him back to the beginning. Yet he did not turn back. He learned to live without security, to accept uncertainty as a state, not a problem. In that constant instability, his mind sharpened. He realized that true progress is not made when you have support, but when you have none and must build it yourself. As his ideas matured, they began to produce results, but not for him. He worked for others, designing, improving, solving problems everyone else avoided. His solutions worked, his concepts won, yet the credit went to others. He watched fame stick to those who stood in the spotlight while he remained in the background, unseen but essential. That bitterness did not break him, but it changed him. He began to understand the cost of humility and the danger of excessive loyalty. A quiet but persistent thought emerged. Ideas without a name do not endure. Every success that did not bear his signature deepened the inner conflict between passion for work and the desire to leave his own mark. It was the first time ambition collided with reality and refused to back down. At some point, Ferdinand's thinking went beyond machines and into the lives of people. He saw a world where cars were a privilege, a symbol of wealth and power, not freedom. That injustice quietly haunted him. He began to develop the idea of a vehicle that would be simple, durable, and accessible to everyone. A car that does not demand attention, but serves. He wasn't concerned with luxury or flair, only with survival on rough roads, cold mornings, and years of wear. In that vision, there was no glamour, only purpose. Yet such an idea could not exist in a vacuum. The era in which it was born carried its own weight, its own darkness. His vision of mobility for the people gained support from powerful structures, each with their own reasons, their own goals. Ferdinand believed that technology could remain pure, even when used in a dirty world. That conviction would later prove to be one of his greatest challenges. When war swallowed Europe, the line between engineer and accomplice became dangerously thin. Technology no longer served movement alone, it served destruction. Ferdinand found himself trapped between his passion for creating and a reality in which his ideas were used for purposes beyond his control. Then came the fall. Lost reputation, lost freedom, years spent in silence and confinement. The man who had spent his life trying to make things move was left motionless. In that silence, there were no victories, only unanswered questions. Does genius free one from responsibility or make it heavier? The price of ambition arrived without warning, personal and relentless. From that darkness, he did not emerge the same, and the world would never look at his name without a shadow. Yet the story did not end there. It only found a new voice. While Ferdinand was absent, the world did not stop, but it fractured. On the ruins of defeat remained his son, Ferdinand Porsche, carrying a surname that bore both weight and doubt. He did not inherit an empire, he inherited a question. Was this name a burden to discard or a foundation to repair? Without grand words or confidence born of power, Ferry began anew. Workshops were cold, materials scarce, trust nearly non-existent. Yet there was a need to save the name from oblivion and disgrace. Ferry did not try to surpass his father, he sought to understand his mistakes and salvage what was valuable. In the quiet chaos of the post-war world, he learned how to build a future without relying on past glory. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process, but a necessary one for the Porsche name to rise again. From that silence and scarcity emerged the first car to bear the Porsche name. It was neither luxurious nor flawless, but it was honest, lightweight, simple, built to drive rather than to impress. In every part, you could feel a philosophy of survival, nothing unnecessary, nothing too heavy, everything with purpose. This car was not born in a large factory, but in improvised conditions where every mistake meant a new delay. Yet when it finally hit the road, it was clear that something different had been born. It did not shout with power, it spoke with balance. It was proof that a name could live on its own work, not on the memories of others. That first step did not change the industry overnight, but it laid the foundation for an identity that would be refined over decades. Porsche once again had a voice, quiet but certain. Racing did not come as a whim, but as a necessity. Porsche did not need to prove himself with words, only with miles. Tracks became a place where truth could not be hidden, where every flaw was exposed. Small, lightweight cars entered battles with larger, stronger opponents, often without expectation of survival, let alone victory. But in that very imbalance, Porsche found advantage. Reliability, balance, and mechanical intuition. Everything nurtured in silent workshops now spoke loudly. Every completed race was confirmation that the philosophy made sense. Wins came gradually, almost imperceptibly, but they changed the world's perception. Porsche was no longer just a name in the making, it was a symbol of precision that demanded no excuses. Racing became both a laboratory and a courtroom, in which the brand continually vindicated itself. When the silhouette that would later become iconic appeared, the decision was far from easy. In a world rushing toward new lines and fleeting trends, Porsche chose to remain true to itself. That shape was not the result of marketing, but of function. Every curve had a reason, every detail a purpose. As years passed, the pressure to radically change the design grew stronger. Fear of obsolescence collided with fear of betraying its own philosophy. Yet Porsche chose continuity. It changed from within but remained faithful outwardly. That stubbornness carried risk, but also strength. The car became recognizable at first glance, timeless in an industry that rarely forgives stagnation. The icon survived not because it was perfect, but because it was genuine. As Porsche grew, so did the expectations. More cars, bigger factories, higher profits. What once seemed like a goal had become a burden. Every step forward carried the question, was the brand straying from what created it? Market pressures didn't care about emotions or heritage. They demanded more power, more luxury, more adaptation to the masses. Inside the company, quiet battles unfolded between engineers and accountants, between ideals and survival. There were moments when it seemed Porsche was too stubborn to survive its own success. Every decision carried the risk of losing its soul for stability. In this tense balance, it became clear that the greatest challenge was no longer speed on the track, but the ability to remain true to oneself in a world that rewards little patience. The rescue did not come from a sudden turn, but from understanding. Porsche had to learn how to evolve without abandoning itself. New models and approaches were introduced, yet the core philosophy remained intact. Lighter construction, precise handling, the sense of connection between car and driver. These were values that survived every adaptation. The company found a way to thrive financially without losing its identity, a rare feat in the industry. The return to balance was not spectacular, but it was steady. Porsche once again stood firm, not as a rebel against the world, but as a brand that knew who it was and why it existed. This maturity allowed a future where tradition and innovation were not opposites, but allies. Today, Porsche is not just a name on a hood or numbers on a sheet. It is a series of decisions made over decades, each choosing the harder path. In every modern model, the need for precision, for balance between power and control, is still present. Technology has advanced, materials have become sophisticated, yet the idea remains the same. The car must serve the driver, not the other way around. Porsche's found a way to survive in a world of electrification and digital systems without losing the sense of mechanical honesty. Racing remains part of its identity, not as advertisement, but as a source of knowledge. What once began in modest workshops now evolves in world-class centers, yet the spirit has not faded. Porsche today stands as a symbol of discipline, engineering courage, and the decision to never take the easy path. What remains is not just a brand, but a question that outlasts any victory. What does it mean to create in a world that constantly demands more, faster, louder? Porsche's legacy is not in maximum speed, but in perseverance, in the willingness to pay the price of one's choices, even when they are wrong. From the boy in the workshop, through the shadows of history, to a brand that survived its own mistakes, this story is about the difficulty of staying true. The path is not without stains, but it leaves a clear mark. And perhaps therein lies the essence, that what is left behind is not just the sound of an engine, but the feeling that every drive, every creation, had meaning. In the end, it asks the listener, would you have the courage to choose the same path, knowing its cost?